When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I remember the first night I heard it. It was not a song, not even a melody, only broken fragments of keys pressed with hesitant fingers, echoing from the basement of the old music hall. At first I thought it was the wind, howling through the cracks of rotting wood and forgotten windows. But then, the sound lingered too long, resonant, as though someone was really there, sitting before the dust-covered piano. The locals had warned me before I came. They said the school was cursed, that no student dared linger after dusk. But I am not a man easily frightened by stories. I was a foreign researcher then, traveling through Asia to collect forgotten folk tales and superstitions. My name is Thomas Hale. I had published books about European urban legends, and I thought myself immune to the chill of ghost stories. Yet that night, beneath the pale glow of a paper lantern, with incense smoke curling like phantom hands through the corridor, I realized how foolish I was. There are places where silence is alive, thick, waiting, listening, and there are sounds that should not exist at all. The school's basement had been locked for over a decade. They said a girl disappeared there during a rehearsal. She had been a gifted pianist, destined for the stage. One evening she was heard playing alone, and when the music stopped, she was gone. No one ever saw her leave. No footprints, no cries, no body. Only the piano remained, and after that day the instrument was sealed away. Still, when night drapes its black veil over the schoolyard, someone plays. Sometimes a lullaby, sometimes a chaotic storm of notes. Always faint, always just beyond reach. I did not come here to chase ghosts, yet something in those chords seemed to call my name, as though a hidden story begged to be told. Perhaps it was arrogance, or perhaps destiny, but I decided to stay. I would sleep beneath the same roof as that piano, listen night after night, and write down whatever truth emerged. But I must warn you, truth does not always free us. Sometimes it shackles us tighter than lies. And so, if you choose to follow me into these 12 nights of whispers and keys, do so with care. For the further we descend into the basement, the harder it becomes to tell whether we are chasing music or being led by it. I had been given a spare room in the old dormitory, just across the courtyard from the music building. The caretaker, an elderly man with clouded eyes and a voice rasping like dry leaves, handed me a brass key and whispered, "Do not stay awake past midnight. If you hear it, cover your ears." He said it so softly I might have mistaken it for a cough, but his eyes lingered on mine with unsettling weight. I laughed politely, though inside I felt a chill trace my spine. Perhaps he only wanted to frighten me, to keep outsiders from prying into old stories. Yet that night, when I sat at my desk beneath the pale glow of a single oil lamp, the silence itself pressed against me like a damp cloth. The room smelled faintly of incense smoke and mold. Crickets sang outside, but within these walls it was as if the world had been muffled. The old floorboards creaked whenever I shifted, though I tried to stay still, listening. And then it came. At first, so faint I thought it was my own heartbeat playing tricks. The sound of a single note, struck low and deep, as if someone had pressed the farthest key of a piano. It vibrated through the walls, traveled under my skin. Then another, higher, delicate, like the tentative step of a child on a dark stair. The melody grew uncertain, stumbling, yet undeniably human. Whoever played knew the instrument once, but now seemed to hesitate, as though remembering after a long silence. Each note lingered, hollow, traveling through the pipes and stone like a sigh. I held my breath. My pulse raced, but my body refused to move. It was not simply sound, it was presence. The air in the room thickened, weighted down by invisible eyes. My lamp flickered, bending shadows along the cracked plaster walls. The caretaker's words returned to me. Cover your ears. But I did not. I listened. The music unfolded like a broken lullaby, uneven, swaying between sweetness and sorrow. In its pauses, I heard more than silence. I heard a faint scraping, as though a wooden bench shifted or a shoe dragged across stone. I rose from my chair. My hand trembled as I lifted the lamp, its weak flame barely pushing back the dark. The corridor outside was narrow, its walls lined with faded photographs of students long gone, their faces once smiling, now blurred and ghostly with age. Step by step, I crossed the courtyard. The night air clung damp against my skin. The music grew clearer. Yes, it was coming from the basement of the music hall. The entrance door groaned when I touched it, though I swear I had not yet pushed. Inside, the building exhaled a breath of stale dust and cold stone. My lamp shuddered, flames stretching tall as though pulled by unseen hands. I followed the sound down the staircase, each step groaning in protest. The railing was slick, not with water, but with something oily, as though hundreds of hands had passed there long ago and never left their trace behind. At the bottom stood the basement door, thick wood barred with rusted iron. They had told me it was locked, but tonight it was open, just a crack, and through that narrow gap seeped the melody, fragile and trembling, as if begging to be heard. I lifted my hand toward the door. The iron handle was icy cold, almost burning. Before I touched it, the music stopped. Silence. A silence so deep it roared. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. No footsteps, no shuffling of bench or breath. Only the slow echo of my own pulse. I wanted to step back, to leave, to obey the caretaker's warning. But then, in the silence, came a whisper. Not music this time, but a voice. Soft, drawn out, so close to my ear it might have been on the other side of the door. Play with me. My hand froze on the iron. My lamp hissed, flame bending low, nearly snuffed out. And in that wavering half-light, I thought I saw it, pressed faintly against the wood, as though from within. The outline of a hand, slender, trembling, reaching for mine. The handprint faded as quickly as breath on glass. One blink, and the wood was bare again. Old, cracked, harmless. But my own hand remained on the iron handle, damp with sweat, unwilling to let go. I told myself it was only imagination, a trick of flame and shadow. Yet deep down I knew, shadows cannot whisper. The silence pressed heavier now, thicker than any sound. I leaned closer, listening, waiting for another note, another murmur, but the basement held its breath. Finally, with a shaky laugh meant only for myself, I turned the handle. It resisted, stiff with rust, but then moved with a groan that echoed down the stairwell like the throat of something waking. The door opened just enough for me to peer inside. Blackness. Absolute. My lamp's glow seemed swallowed at once, as though the air itself devoured light. I stepped back. A wave of cold rolled out from that gap. Cold not of weather, but of absence. The kind that steals warmth from marrow. The caretaker's words returned. Do not stay awake past midnight. If you hear it, cover your ears. It was past midnight now, and I had not covered my ears. I retreated upstairs, telling myself I would return by daylight. The piano, the whispers, even the handprint. Everything could be explained when the sun rose. Ghosts dissolve in daylight, don't they? But the sun came, pale and tired, and still the questions lingered. The next morning I found the caretaker sweeping fallen leaves from the courtyard. His broom scraped slow circles, never lifting from the ground. I asked as casually as I could about the basement. He stopped sweeping, but did not look at me. The door is locked. No, I said quietly. It was open last night. The broom creaked in his grip. His shoulders stiffened, though his voice stayed flat. You should not go there again. I pressed further. The girl, the one who disappeared. Did they ever find her? His head lifted, and for the first time I saw his eyes clearly. Pale, clouded with age, but behind the mist, something sharp, something afraid. She was never found, he whispered, because she never left. His broom moved again, scraping across the stones. I wanted to ask more, but his silence was final. That night I could not resist. Curiosity is a sickness, and I was already infected. When the clock struck 12, I sat awake in my room, the lamp burning low, my ears strained for the first note. For a time, nothing came. Perhaps it would not return, and I could finally sleep. But then, like breath drawn through hollow bone, the piano began again. The melody was clearer than before, almost playful, almost taunting. I clutched the lamp and hurried back across the courtyard, each step sinking me deeper into the night. The building stood waiting, door ajar as though it had been expecting me. I descended the stairs. The basement door was shut, this time locked tight. I rattled the handle. Iron groaned but did not yield. And still, the music flowed from behind it, steady, patient. Each note pressed into my chest like fingers tapping a heartbeat not my own. Who's there? I called through the wood. My voice came back to me, warped like a stranger's echo. The piano stopped. Silence again. Then a sound. Not music, not voice, but a faint scratching, like nails trailing across the inside of the door. Slow, deliberate, closer to the handle. I stumbled back. The lamp flickered wildly, shadows thrashing along the walls. The scratching ceased, and then 3 knocks. Soft, precise, from the inside. I fled up the stairs, breath tearing at my throat. Behind me, the knocks followed, echoing in rhythm with my steps, until I slammed the main door shut and stumbled back into the open night. From the courtyard, I looked back at the building. No light in its windows, no sound in its walls. Still, I swore I saw movement. Behind the glass of the upper floor, the faint silhouette of a girl standing perfectly still, watching. The figure at the window dissolved like smoke, leaving me in the courtyard with my lamp shaking in my hand. For a long while, I could not move. The silence after her vanishing was heavier than any sound, pressing on my chest until I thought I might suffocate. When finally I stumbled back to my room, the sky was still black. Dawn would not arrive for hours, yet I could not close my eyes. Each time I tried, her image reappeared. The stillness of her posture, the faint suggestion of eyes watching me through the glass. Sleep became impossible. By the time the sun began to pale the horizon, I had resolved to search for answers in daylight. I convinced myself that whatever horror had clutched at me during the night would shrink beneath the morning sun. But the more I tried to believe that, the less convincing it sounded. The school's main corridor stretched long and narrow, with windows clouded by grime and walls lined with class photographs. Decades of students stared out from behind glass, their uniforms neat, their faces frozen in posed smiles. Dust dulled the frames, so thick that I had to brush them with my sleeve to see clearly. At first, nothing struck me as unusual. Groups of children, teachers, musical instruments in their hands, a violin here, a flute there. But as I studied more closely, a peculiar unease grew. Some faces had blurred with time, but not in the way old photographs normally fade. Instead of fading evenly, the blurs seemed selective, as if a hand had rubbed away one particular face while leaving the rest untouched. The effect was unsettling. Entire rows of students stood clear and crisp, while 1 or 2 individuals were reduced to a smear of shadow, faceless and nameless. I moved slowly down the hall, frame by frame. My fingers traced the glass, leaving streaks in the dust. Then I saw it, a portrait dated 12 years earlier, the year they said the girl disappeared. The class was posed inside the music hall, with instruments arranged carefully. And there she was, the pianist. Her hands, long and delicate, rested neatly on her lap. She did not smile like the others. Her expression was distant, almost solemn, as though she had been caught in the wrong moment. But what chilled me most was not her face. It was its clarity. The photograph was faded and yellowed, yet her image appeared too sharp, too recent. Her eyes met mine across the glass, steady, unwavering, and alive in a way the others were not. My breath caught. I staggered back, nearly knocking another frame from the wall. When I steadied it, I noticed faint marks carved into the wooden border of the pianist's photograph. At first I thought it was accidental scratching, but when I leaned closer, I saw words etched by some desperate hand. She plays when the silence is deepest. The phrase seemed to pulse with a hidden rhythm, as though my heart had begun to beat in time with it. I backed away unsettled and nearly collided with another frame. In this one, the blur was worse. 3 students erased entirely, leaving only empty outlines of bodies. My stomach twisted. How many had vanished here, and why did no one speak of them? Later that morning, I found the caretaker sweeping the courtyard again. His broom scraped against the stones in slow, repetitive arcs. I approached, holding my voice steady. "The photographs," I said. "Some of the faces, they're gone. Why?" He froze but did not lift his eyes. His knuckles whitened on the broomstick. "Time erases," he muttered. "Not like that," I pressed. "One face missing, the rest intact. That's not time. Who is the girl at the piano?" At that, he finally looked at me. His eyes, clouded though they were, seemed to pierce through me. "Some doors," he whispered, "are not meant to open. Some music is not meant to be heard." Before I could demand more, he turned and shuffled into the storage shed, closing the door firmly. I was left alone with the broom's last scrape echoing in my ears. By nightfall, my curiosity had grown unbearable. I walked the corridor again, lamp in hand, determined to examine every frame. The building was colder now, though no windows were open. My footsteps seemed to stir faint breaths in the air, whispers that died as soon as I tried to listen. When I reached the pianist's photograph again, I froze. The glass was misted, though the corridor was dry. Slowly, a shape emerged on the inside surface. A handprint pressed flat against the glass. Slender fingers spread wide. My lamp flickered violently. For an instant, I caught sight of my own reflection. But it was wrong. The reflection's eyes were not mine. They were hers. Dark, deep, and fixed on me with an intensity that hollowed my stomach. I staggered back, colliding with another frame. The glass cracked loudly, the sound ricocheting down the hall like a gunshot. My heart pounded as I steadied the frame, terrified that I had broken it. The photograph inside had shifted, and in the new angle of light, I saw something I hadn't before. Behind the neat rows of students, faint but undeniable, was a shadow. Not the photographer's, not an object in the room. A tall, crooked silhouette looming in the background, featureless, bending over the children as if listening. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the lamp. The flame shrank, then flared tall, casting wild shadows. The corridor seemed to pulse, photographs breathing in unison. And then, beneath my feet, I heard it, the first note of the piano. Low, trembling. This time the melody was no hesitant lullaby. It was a funeral dirge, slow and mournful, each key pressed with aching weight. The sound seeped through the floorboards, filling the hall, weaving into the cracks of the walls until the whole building seemed to grieve. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it made no difference. The music was not only in the air, it was inside me, vibrating through my bones. I stumbled toward the exit, desperate for open sky. As I reached the end of the corridor, I dared one last glance back. Every photograph now seemed alive, faces watching me, smiles gone stiff, eyes wide with silent warning. And in the center frame, the pianist, her hand had lifted from her lap. She was no longer still. Her fingers, impossibly, had moved. They hovered above invisible keys, as if she were continuing the melody herself. and in that flickering lamplight, her lips parted ever so slightly, not in a smile, but in a whisper, too faint to hear, yet strong enough to chase me out into the night. The night did not release me easily. Even after I fled the corridor, after I pushed open the doors and stepped into the courtyard, the melody clung to me. It followed like a shadow, vibrating not in the air but inside my ribs, as though the piano strings had been strung through my bones. The courtyard, usually quiet, seemed alive with whispers carried by the damp wind. The lanterns along the wall sputtered in the breeze, their glow trembling as though afraid of the dark itself. I sat on the cold stone steps and pressed my palms to my ears, but the music would not fade. The dirge swelled, mournful and unrelenting, played by hands I could not see. I do not know how long I remained there. Perhaps minutes, perhaps hours. At some point the caretaker appeared, moving through the courtyard with his broom as if nothing were amiss. He glanced at me once, briefly, then lowered his eyes. "You heard it again," he said flatly. I wanted to demand answers, but my voice faltered. All I managed was a whisper. "Why does it sound like grief?" The caretaker leaned on his broom, his back curved with the weight of age, or perhaps with the weight of silence kept too long. "Because it is," he murmured, "a grief that cannot end." Before I could press further, he turned away. His figure vanished into the mist at the edge of the courtyard, leaving me alone with the song that gnawed at my thoughts until the first gray light of dawn finally silenced it. Daylight brought no peace. Instead, it brought exhaustion. I wandered the grounds trying to distract myself, but the school seemed determined to remind me of its secrets. The classrooms were empty, yet I felt watched from every corner. The air smelled faintly of incense, though none had been burned. Even the birds that circled above the roof seemed muted, their wings slicing the silence without sound. At noon, I returned to the Hall of Photographs. My body resisted, but some unseen pull drew me back. The frames stood exactly as I had left them. Dust settled across the glass once more, concealing the sharpness of her gaze. I wanted to believe I had imagined it all: the handprint, the moving fingers, the parted lips. But the crack in the glass where I had stumbled remained. Evidence. I reached out, fingertips brushing the frame. The wood felt warm beneath my skin, as though it remembered being touched before. And when I leaned closer, pressing my ear against the glass, I heard it again. Not the piano this time. Breathing, faint, shallow, as though someone was trapped inside the photograph, gasping for air. I recoiled so violently I nearly dropped my lamp. My chest heaved, sweat slick on my palms. I told myself I was imagining it, that exhaustion was playing tricks. Yet when I stepped away, I swore the girl's eyes followed me, her sorrow deepening in the grainy paper. That night, I did not wait for the melody. I forced myself to lie on the bed, to close my eyes and pray for silence. But silence is fragile, easily shattered. At exactly midnight, the first note struck. This time, I did not move. I lay frozen, heart pounding as the dirge unfurled. The song was fuller now, no longer broken by hesitation. It was whole, deliberate, and unbearably heavy, each chord falling like a spade of earth on a coffin. I tried to cover my ears with the pillow, but the music seeped through, weaving into the air I breathed. I could taste it, metallic, bitter, like rust. My body trembled. I wanted to scream, to run, to flee this cursed place, yet my limbs were leaden, pinned by the sound. And then, beneath the melody, came another sound. A voice, soft, distant, barely a murmur. The words were indistinct at first, carried along by the rise and fall of the keys, but gradually they sharpened. "Don't forget me," the phrase repeated over and over, tangled with the sorrowful tune. My chest constricted, my throat tightened. The plea was not meant for me, and yet it bound me all the same. I could bear it no longer. I seized the lamp and stumbled into the corridor, driven by equal parts terror and compulsion. The music guided me, tugging me like a puppet string. Down the hall, past the photographs toward the stairwell. The basement door stood waiting, as though it had known I would come. This time it was open. The stairwell gaped below, swallowing my light. I hesitated at the top step, every instinct screaming to turn back. But the melody surged, filling the air until there was no space left for breath. My feet moved without command, carrying me downward. The air grew colder with each step, damp seeping into my skin. My lamp hissed, flames straining, as though suffocating. At the bottom, the piano waited. It sat in the center of the room, cloaked in dust and cobwebs, its once polished surface dulled by years of abandonment. The bench was empty. No figure sat there. No hands touched the keys. Yet the song played on. I approached slowly, heart rattling in my chest. The notes trembled through the wood, resonating against the stone floor. I reached out, fingers hovering above the lid, and the music stopped. Silence. The abruptness struck me harder than any sound. The room seemed to breathe out at once, shadows thickening along the corners. I lifted the lamp higher, and there it was, a single handprint pressed into the dust upon the piano surface. Slender, delicate, the same as I had seen on the photograph's glass, the same as on the basement door. Fresh. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the lamp. Behind me, the bench scraped across the floor, slow and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. The piano lid rattled once, twice, then slammed shut with a force that shook the room. From the darkness beyond the instrument came a whisper, stretched thin and trembling. "Play with me." The whisper lingered in the air long after it ceased, like smoke that refused to clear. "Play with me." Those three words gnawed at my chest, each syllable a hook that would not release. I stood rooted, the lamplight trembling in my grip, shadows clawing upward along the walls. The piano sat before me, silent now, its lid closed as though it had never made a sound. Dust coated its surface except where the handprint pressed stark and fresh. That was proof enough. I was not imagining this. Something inhuman had touched the instrument. Something was waiting. I wanted to flee. Every bone in my body screamed to turn back, to climb the stairs, to abandon this cursed basement. Yet my feet would not move. My body, traitorous, leaned toward the piano, as though the whisper had wrapped invisible strings around my arms and legs. "Play with me." The words pulsed again. Not aloud this time, but inside my head, vibrating against my skull. My hand trembled. Against all reason, I lowered the lamp onto the bench and stretched my fingers toward the keys. The lid opened without resistance. I had not touched it. It lifted on its own, groaning softly as though welcoming me. Beneath, the keys gleamed faintly in the dim light, far too clean for an instrument abandoned so long. White as bone, black as char, their surface seemed to pulse like skin beneath breath. I pressed a single note. The sound rang sharp and clear, echoing unnaturally long against the stone walls. It was not a simple tone. It resonated inside me, rattling my chest like a second heartbeat. Another note, this time lower. The vibration sank into the floor, as though stirring something buried beneath the stone. My breath came shallow. I told myself I would stop, that two notes were enough. But my fingers moved of their own accord, striking a third, a fourth, weaving the beginnings of a melody I did not recognize, yet somehow knew. It was the same mournful dirge I had heard from my room, from the corridor, but now it came alive beneath my own touch. The song unfolded like memory, guiding my fingers in patterns too complex for me to invent. Each chord trembled with grief so heavy it bent my spine. Tears blurred my vision before I realized I was crying. And then, another sound joined, not from the keys but from beside me, the creak of the bench shifting under unseen weight. I froze mid-note, every muscle rigid. Slowly, mechanically, I turned my head. The lamp flickered, flame stretching thin. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then the dust on the bench stirred, pressed down by something invisible. Someone was sitting next to me. I tried to pull away, but my fingers refused to leave the keys. Instead, another set of hands, slender, pale, transparent, slid over mine. They were cold as river water, their touch feather-light yet unyielding. Together we pressed the next chord. The sound was devastating, rich, mournful, filled with a sorrow that split my chest open. The invisible hands guided me, forcing me into the song's current. I struggled, but the harder I resisted, the deeper I sank. The melody swelled, filling every corner of the basement. Cobwebs shivered from the ceiling. Dust spiraled upward, as though lifted by the sound alone. Shadows in the corners bent forward, leaning closer, listening. The hands pressed harder, their fingers laced with mine. For a moment I thought I heard breathing beside my ear. Shallow, trembling, yet achingly human. And then, faint but distinct, a voice whispered, "Don't stop." I do not know how long we played. Minutes, perhaps hours. Time fractured under the weight of the melody. Each note bound me tighter, until my body belonged less to me and more to the song. At last, the piece ended. The final chord echoed, fading into silence so deep it felt alive. The hands lifted. I collapsed forward, gasping, forehead nearly striking the keys. When I lifted my head, the bench was empty. Dust settled once more. The piano lid lowered slowly, sighing shut as though satisfied. I staggered back, seized the lamp, and stumbled toward the stairs. But before I reached the first step, a sound stopped me cold. Applause. Faint, scattered, like many hands clapping in a distant room. It grew louder, echoing through the walls, filling the basement with hollow praise. I spun, lamp jerking wildly, but saw nothing, only shadows quivering as though in delight. The clapping ceased as abruptly as it began. In the silence that followed, a single voice rang clear. "Encore!" I fled. I do not remember how I reached my room. My lamp nearly died on the way, sputtering with every gust of unseen wind. When I slammed the door shut behind me, the silence that followed was suffocating, pressing heavy against my ears. I collapsed onto the bed, trembling uncontrollably. My fingers still ached from the keys, though I had played unwillingly. I stared at them, horrified to find faint gray dust clinging to my skin, as though the piano itself had seeped into me. Sleep did not come. Each time I closed my eyes, I felt the cold hands on mine, guiding, pressing, whispering. I saw her face from the photograph, eyes too sharp, lips parted as if still mouthing words I could not hear. And beneath it all, a promise, or perhaps a threat, echoed in my skull. "You will play again." The night after the applause, I could not bring myself to approach the basement. I stayed in my room with the lamp burning low, every muscle tight with dread. Yet dread is not the absence of sound. It is the anticipation of it. I lay in bed waiting, certain that at any moment the piano would begin again. It did not. That silence was worse than any melody. It stretched long into the hours, thick and suffocating, until I no longer trusted it. My body ached with the memory of those hands pressing mine to the keys. My ears rang with the phantom echo of applause. I longed for quiet, true quiet, but the absence of sound felt like a trap, baiting me toward the inevitable. When dawn came, I thought I might feel relief. Instead, I found evidence of the night's intrusion. My hands bore faint smears of gray dust, though I had not touched the piano again. And in the corner of my room where the wall met the floor, lay a scrap of torn sheet music. The notes upon it matched the dirge I had played, written in a hand so faint it looked almost erased. I did not remember bringing it here. All that day the melody stalked me, not aloud, not through the halls, but inside my skull. A rhythm tapped at the edges of my thoughts, pulling me back to the keys, reminding me of the unfinished performance. Each step I took seemed measured against it. Each breath I drew seemed to echo its tempo. The caretaker avoided me. When I sought him out in the courtyard, he turned away, muttering something about not feeding the silence. I tried to stop him, to demand he explain, but his broom scraped harder against the stones until it drowned my voice. By evening, I was unraveling. Every shadow in the hallway looked like an audience waiting. The photographs on the wall seemed to lean closer, their blurred faces sharpening whenever I passed. The pianist's eyes followed me relentlessly, dark wells that promised no escape. When the clock struck midnight, the dirge began again. This time, the sound was not confined to the basement. It filled the dormitory, resonating through every beam and floorboard. I pressed my hands against my ears, but the music seeped through bone and blood. My body shook with it, each note rattling through me until resistance was impossible. I stumbled into the corridor, lamp in hand, dragged by a force beyond will. The photographs shimmered as I passed, glass misting from within. For an instant, I thought I saw hands pressed against every frame, clawing to break free. Down the stairwell, the basement door stood open. Light pulsed faintly from within, not the glow of my lamp, but something pale, unnatural, as though the walls themselves exhaled phosphorescence. The piano awaited, its keys gleaming like teeth. The bench was empty again, yet I knew I would not remain alone for long. As I stepped inside, the door behind me slammed shut. The sound echoed like thunder, sealing me into darkness. The audience revealed itself slowly. At first, only shadows lined the walls, slender shapes bent at odd angles, their heads cocked unnaturally. They had no faces, yet I felt their attention pierce me. When the first chord struck under my reluctant fingers, they shifted closer, pressing into the corners, eager. The hands returned, slender, translucent, ice cold, sliding over mine with possessive grace. The melody swelled, guiding me into its rhythm. I tried to resist, but resistance only twisted the notes into discord that made my teeth ache. When I surrendered, the music flowed smoother, as though the song itself rewarded obedience. The audience swayed with the rhythm. Their outlines shivered, stretching taller with each crescendo, bending forward in silent anticipation. The air thickened with their presence, heavy with the stench of damp earth and extinguished incense. And then it happened. One of the shadows peeled itself from the wall, drifting forward like smoke given form. It hovered near the piano, head cocked, listening. As the melody rose, it leaned closer, its outline flickering until it took shape. Limbs, hair, a suggestion of a girl. The pianist. She sat beside me, her form translucent, but her eyes horribly clear. They burned with a sorrow I could not endure. Her mouth moved, whispering words drowned by the music. Yet her hands pressed mine harder, demanding more. The audience clapped, faint at first, then louder, an impossible sound in that stone chamber. Their hollow applause echoed around me, filling every inch of air. I struck the final chord, and the room erupted, not with cheers, but with a roar of shadows collapsing inward, devouring the light. I woke on the floor of my room. The lamp lay shattered beside me, its glass splintered across the boards. My hands throbbed with pain, skin raw as though I had played until the flesh wore thin. The scrap of sheet music lay on my chest. New notes had been added in the same faint hand. At the bottom, 3 words were scrawled. Next performance. Soon. I tried to leave the school the next morning. I packed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and crossed the courtyard toward the gate. The air was still, the world strangely hushed, as though the silence itself were listening. But when I reached the gate, I froze. The lock had not been there before. Thick iron chains bound the doors, their weight too heavy for me to move. A new padlock gleamed in the morning sun, cold and unyielding. I called for the caretaker. My voice cracked with desperation, but no answer came. The courtyard remained empty, broom abandoned against the wall. When I turned back toward the dormitory, the windows were no longer vacant. In every pane of glass, blurred faces pressed outward, watching, waiting. And from the basement, faint but insistent, drifted the first note of the encore. The chains glimmered under the morning sun, cruel in their newness. They were not relics of rust or age, but fresh, solid iron, their links thick as a man's wrist. I rattled them until my palms burned, but the gate did not budge. The lock, heavy and black, mocked me with its silence. I stood there, trembling, breath shallow. The air was still, no bird song, no insect hum. Even the wind seemed banished. The silence pressed close, the same suffocating hush that always came before the piano began. I shouted for the caretaker. My voice cracked, echoing against the stone walls of the courtyard. But no answer came. The broom still leaned where I had last seen it, propped against the wall, bristles bent, abandoned. It was then I realized the truth. I was alone. Or worse, I was not alone, but the only living soul left among something else. I returned to the dormitory, footsteps echoing too loudly against the stone. The corridor of photographs greeted me like a gauntlet. Dust clung to the frames, yet when I drew near, I saw fresh handprints smeared across the glass from within. Every blurred face seemed closer to sharpening, as though trying to remember themselves through my gaze. I could not bear their eyes. I hurried past, but the sound followed, faint, rhythmic. Not the piano, not yet. Footsteps. They matched my pace exactly, one step behind, though when I turned, the corridor lay empty. At last I collapsed into my room, bolting the door, though I knew wood and iron were meaningless here. My hands shook too violently to hold the lamp steady. On the desk, the scrap of sheet music awaited, as though it had been placed carefully during my absence. This time the notes were different. They formed not a dirge, but something more insistent, sharp, repetitive, a rhythm like a summons. Beneath it in faint scrawl lay a single phrase. Tonight the audience grows. I could not leave. The gate was bound. The caretaker vanished. The school itself holding me hostage. I paced my room until the walls seemed to close in. My every thought returned to the piano, to the cold hands guiding mine, to the applause that had shaken the basement walls. By evening, exhaustion dragged me into a restless sleep. I dreamed of the classroom portraits. The blurred students stepped down from their frames, surrounding me with blank faces. Only the pianist remained sharp, her eyes burning with clarity. She leaned close and whispered into my ear, though her lips did not move. "You belong here now?" I woke screaming, sweat soaking the sheets. Outside, the bell tower struck 12, and the encore began. The piano's voice filled the night, louder than ever. This was no gentle lure, no sorrowful dirge. The music commanded. Each note hammered against my chest, demanding obedience. I resisted as long as I could, covering my ears, burying my head beneath the pillow, clawing at my temples as though I could tear the sound out. But resistance only sharpened the melody, driving it deeper until it rattled my teeth. At last, broken, I rose. The lamp flickered weakly in my grip as I staggered into the corridor. The photographs were alive. Faces blurred hours ago now sharpened, eyes gleaming with unnatural clarity. They watched me pass, their gazes heavy with hunger. Some mouths parted, though no sound emerged. Down the stairwell, the basement door was wide open. A pale glow pulsed within, like breath. I descended, each step sinking heavier than the last. The piano waited, but this time the bench was not empty. She sat there, the girl from the photograph, translucent, her edges blurred like smoke, yet her presence undeniable. She did not turn when I entered. Her fingers hovered above the keys, waiting. I froze. My breath hitched. Part of me hoped she would not notice me, that I could retreat unseen. But she did not need to turn. Her voice found me, soft and clear. "Come, sit." The command left no room for refusal. My body moved without consent, drawn toward the bench. The lamp sputtered as I placed it on the floor, its flame nearly extinguished. I sat beside her. The cold radiating from her form bit into my skin, yet I could not move away. Her fingers, delicate and translucent, lowered to the keys. The first notes rang out, not sorrowful now, but sharp, insistent, a summoning. She paused, turned her gaze to me. Her eyes were voids filled with endless night. Slowly, she placed her hands over mine again. Together, we pressed the next chord. The walls quivered. The shadows leaned forward. And then the audience arrived. They seeped from the stone, peeling away like damp paper. Dozens of them, then hundreds, filling the basement walls. Their forms were thin, faceless, swaying in rhythm to the music. The air grew suffocating under their collective presence, heavy with mildew and incense. The girl guided me faster now, forcing the melody into frenzy. The audience leaned closer, closer still, until they crowded against the piano, their formless heads nearly brushing the keys. Their applause began before the song even ended, hollow and violent, echoing like bones rattling in empty coffins. The final chord struck like a blow. The audience erupted, not with cheers, but with a terrible unison sigh, as though inhaling me into their emptiness. And in that moment I knew. Each encore was not performance, but ritual. The blurred faces in the photographs were not forgotten students. They were the audience bound to return again and again, their forms fading until nothing remained but hunger for another song. The girl leaned close. Her voice brushed my ear, cold as frost. Soon you will not need me. You will play for them alone. Shiana. When her whisper faded, the basement did not return to silence. The echoes of the performance lingered like smoke after a fire. The faceless crowd still swayed, their hollow bodies trembling with anticipation, though the last chord had long since died. They did not vanish. They waited. I felt it immediately, their hunger. It pressed against my skin, burrowed into my chest, gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. They were not satisfied. The encore was not enough. The pianist lifted her hands from mine at last. For a moment I thought I was free, but then she turned to me, her face sharp against the dim glow. Her lips parted, forming words without sound, and somehow I heard them clear as a bell. The ritual is never finished. I stumbled from the bench, heart hammering, desperate to climb the stairs and flee the basement. But the audience shifted, bodies of shadow gliding silently into my path. They did not touch me, yet their presence alone stopped me cold. It was like pressing against a wall of ice. The pianist rose. She moved without footsteps, her translucent form gliding toward the center of the room. The crowd parted for her, bowing like reeds in the wind. She lifted her arms, delicate hands outstretched, and the shadows bent forward in unison. It was then I understood. This was not a performance. It was worship. The piano stood not as an instrument, but as altar. The music was not song, but sacrifice, and I, against all reason, had become the chosen medium. The girl turned to me again. Her voice slid into my skull, soft and merciless. Each note binds them, each chord feeds them. Do you hear how they call for you? I did hear it now. Beneath the silence, beneath the swell of breathless waiting, a chorus of whispers rose, layered, desperate, pleading. They all spoke the same phrase, tangled into one. Play for us, play for us, play for us. I clutched my head, nails digging into my scalp, but their voices only grew louder. My body lurched toward the piano once more, though my soul screamed to resist. In a burst of panic, I broke free, stumbling past the crowd. Their forms wavered, bending toward me, but did not block my path this time. I bolted up the stairs, through the corridor, back into the dormitory. My chest burned, lungs searing with each breath. But when I slammed the door of my room shut, I knew I had not escaped. The sheet music waited on my desk again. Its pages multiplied, spreading across the wood like a disease. Each page bore new notes, etched in that same faint hand. I tried to rip them, to tear them into shreds, but the paper would not tear. The fibers held fast, stronger than cloth. When I tried to burn them in the lamp flame, the fire bent away, refusing to touch. In the end, I shoved the pages beneath the mattress, trembling, whispering prayers I did not believe. Yet still the whispers followed, seeping through the walls. Play for us, play for us, Play for us. Play. The days bled into each other. I lost sense of time. The gate remained chained, the caretaker absent, the world outside silenced. The only reality left was the cycle, the quiet day, the waiting night, the inevitable call of the piano. Each night the ritual grew stronger. The music would begin at midnight, no matter where I hid. Sometimes it started as a soft hum, vibrating through the floorboards, luring me like a heartbeat. Sometimes it thundered at once, shaking the very walls until dust rained from the ceiling. And always, always the audience gathered. Their numbers swelled. Where once the basement held dozens, now hundreds filled the space. They pressed against each other, faceless heads tilted, arms swaying. I could feel their weight even from above, their presence bending the air like a storm before lightning. I tried once to resist entirely, barricading myself in my room with furniture stacked against the door. But resistance was futile. The whispers filled my skull until my vision blackened. My body rose on its own, puppet-like, dragging me through the barricade with a strength not mine. I woke on the piano bench again, fingers bleeding against the keys, her cold hands guiding me into another endless melody. One night, between chords, I dared to whisper, "Why me?" The girl's eyes flicked to mine, gleaming with sorrow. Her voice shivered through me. "Because you listened. You should have covered your ears." The caretaker's warning returned, cruel and useless. I had not obeyed, and now the ritual had me. The more I played, the more the photographs in the corridor changed. Each morning, when I staggered back to my room, I would glimpse them. Faces sharpened, one by one, no longer blurred. Their clarity was not relief, it was horror. For they were the audience, reclaiming their identities through my music. Some looked young, others aged, but all shared the same hollow eyes. Their mouths twisted as though trying to speak, and I knew one day soon my own face would join them. Last night the ritual shifted. The girl did not guide my hands. She stood aside, watching, while I played alone. The shadows swayed, their whispers fevered, louder than ever. When the final chord struck, the applause shook the stones, and I saw it, faint, reflected in the piano's glossy lid. My face, but not as I knew it. It was blurred. I write this now with trembling hands, though even writing feels futile. The sheet music multiplies each day, pages spilling across the floor, like roots creeping outward. I no longer try to destroy them. Part of me fears they are no longer paper at all, but pieces of myself. The whispers are constant now, not confined to night. They follow me in daylight, in silence, in the beat of my heart. I can no longer tell whether I hear them with my ears or whether I have become one of them. And tonight, I know what they will demand. The encore will not end with applause. The ritual will ask for something more, something final. I thought the applause would be the end. Even blurred faces want closure, some faint reward for their endless waiting. Yet the silence that followed was not release. It was anticipation. It was hunger sharpened into stillness. The whispers began the next morning, before the sun had even burned the mist from the courtyard. Not words at first, but breaths. I heard them in the corners of my room, sighing through the cracks of the floorboards, pooling beneath the bed. When I pressed my ear to the door, they hissed louder, restless. By noon, the whispers grew teeth. Not enough, not enough, not enough. 3 words over and over, overlapping until my skull throbbed. I stumbled into the corridor, desperate to drown them with distance, but the photographs greeted me with sharpened clarity. More faces had returned overnight. Their eyes gleamed, following me in perfect unison. And then I realized, the whispers did not come from the walls. They came from them. That night I tried to resist. I lit every lamp I could find, scattering them through the room until shadows had no place to hide. The glow warmed the stone, chased away the damp, gave me the illusion of safety. But when midnight came, every flame bowed low, not extinguished, submissive. They bent toward the floor as though worshiping something beneath. The first chord struck, heavy as an iron gate slamming shut. My body seized. The lamps flickered in rhythm with the notes, their flames trembling like fearful hearts. I knew better than to fight, yet my legs resisted, stumbling as I staggered toward the basement. The sheet music scattered across the floor, stirred in the unseen wind, pages flipping themselves to reveal new notes I had never played before. The whispers grew louder as I descended the stairwell. This time, they formed words clear enough to freeze my blood. Give us more. Give us more. Give us more. The basement was swollen with shadows. Hundreds now, maybe more, pressed so tightly the air itself grew viscous. The piano gleamed beneath their collective gaze, an altar waiting for sacrifice. The girl stood beside it, translucent and silent, her eyes no longer sorrowful but sharp, expectant. She gestured to the bench. I obeyed, sinking into its weight as though I had no will left to deny her. The music began under my fingers, not slow this time, not mournful, but wild. A storm of chords, notes clashing and tumbling like waves devouring cliffs. My arms ached, wrists burning as the song demanded more than I could give. Yet still the audience swayed, unsatisfied, their whispers rising in furious unison. Not enough, not enough, not enough. I faltered. My fingers slipped. A wrong note shattered the frenzy. The crowd stilled. The silence that followed was worse than the song itself. Every faceless head turned toward me. The air thickened, pressing down until I could scarcely breathe. Then came the voice, hundreds at once, layered into one. Play yourself. I froze, my chest constricted. The girl's eyes pierced mine, unblinking. Slowly she reached toward me, her translucent hand hovering above my heart. You've given them sound, she whispered. Now give them blood. Her fingers sank, not into flesh, but into me. A coldness spread through my ribs, deeper than bone, as though she were pulling at the strings of my very being. My hands trembled on the keys, producing a discordant wail that made the shadows shudder. The audience roared, not with applause, but with demand. Their voices pressed into me, urging, coaxing, commanding. One final request, one final request. I tore myself from the bench, stumbling back, nearly toppling the lamp. My chest ached where her hand had passed through me, a hollow cold that refused to fade. No, I gasped, no more! The crowd hissed in fury. The girl tilted her head, sorrow returning to her face. But it was not pity, it was disappointment. Then they will take what you refuse to give. The basement erupted. Shadows surged forward, faceless heads twisting, arms stretching like smoke. They did not touch me, yet their closeness scraped across my skin like claws. The piano thundered without hands upon it, keys slamming in chaotic frenzy, as if mocking my refusal. I fled, stumbling up the stairs, chased by their whispers. The corridor warped as I ran, photographs shifting in the corners of my vision. The sharpened faces sneered now, mouths gaping in silent laughter. I collapsed into my room, slamming the door, though the sound felt weak, childish. The whispers seeped through the wood, through the stone, through me. I do not know how I survived the night. When dawn broke, I found myself on the floor, curled against the mattress. The sheet music had spread farther, covering the desk, the chair, creeping toward the door like vines. I dared not touch it, but I saw new notes written there. Notes red as rust, as though drawn in something thicker than ink. At the bottom of one page, the faint scrawl curved in jagged letters. The final request is you. The words burned on the sheet music long after I turned my gaze away. The final request is you, not your song, not your hands, you. I staggered back from the desk, knocking over the chair in my panic. My chest heaved, my skin clammy with sweat. The air in the room was heavy, suffused with a waiting silence, as though the walls themselves leaned close to hear my response. I am not I whispered into the emptiness, but my voice trembled. The silence swallowed it, and in its hollow echo, I knew I was lying. Because I had played, because I had listened, because I had stayed. I tried to leave again. I pounded on the chain gate until my fists bruised. The iron was unyielding, the padlock cold as stone. I screamed for the caretaker, for anyone. My voice rang out across the deserted grounds, but nothing stirred, not even the wind. At last I sank to my knees, gasping, and for a moment I thought I heard laughter. Soft, distant, carried on the still air. Not mocking, but triumphant. The sound of a wager already won. When I returned to the dormitory, the photographs were waiting. Every frame sharpened, every face restored. Hundreds of eyes fixed on me, alive with recognition. No longer blurred, no longer forgotten. Their mouths curved into faint smiles, as though my struggle had amused them. But one photograph stopped me cold. The most recent frame, barely a year old. There, among the rows of students, was a new face. Mine. I stared, stomach twisting. My features were pale, sharp, too clear against the faded paper. My eyes, even in the photograph, looked hollow. And beneath the frame, freshly carved into the wooden border, were the words, "You belong to the encore." That night, the piano began before the bell tower struck 12. The first chord rattled through the floorboards, shaking the lamp on my desk. The sheet music stirred, pages flipping violently as though caught in a storm. Though the air was still, the whispers rose in a single chant. Final request, final request, final request. I tried to resist. I clutched the mattress, burying my face in the sheets, refusing to rise. But my body betrayed me. My legs jerked, spasmed, dragged me from the bed. I clawed at the doorframe, nails splitting against the wood, but unseen hands pried me free. The corridor stretched longer than it ever had, lined with photographs that now moved. Faces turned as I passed, eyes following, mouths twitching open. Some smiled, others wept, all alive. Their whispers joined the chant, until the hall itself was a tunnel of voices. The stairwell yawned before me. The basement glowed with its sickly pale light, and the piano awaited. This time the bench was not empty. The girl sat there, but she was different. No longer translucent, no longer blurred. Her form was solid, her skin pale as moonlight, her eyes deep as black wells. She smiled faintly when she saw me, a smile without warmth. "You've played enough songs," she said. Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was a bell, clear, echoing. "Now you must finish the ritual." I shook my head violently, stumbling backward. "No more, I won't." But the audience roared. The shadows swelled, crowding the walls until there was no space left. Their faceless heads tilted as one, their voices thundering. "Final request, final request." The girl rose from the bench. She glided toward me, her hands outstretched. "It will be easier if you accept." Her fingers touched my chest. The cold sank deep, piercing bone, reaching for something I could not name. I gasped, my breath torn away, my body hollowing. "Stop," I croaked. "Please." She leaned close. Her eyes softened, sorrow flickering for an instant. "I did not want this either, but once you listen, there is no turning away. I was like you, long ago." The truth struck like ice. She had been chosen once, trapped as I was now. Her role passed only when another sat at the keys, and now it was me. The piano thundered behind us. Keys struck without hands, pounding a frenzied rhythm that shook the floor. Dust spiraled upward, cobwebs tore free, the air itself vibrating with the song. The girl's hands pressed harder into my chest. My vision blurred. Around me, the audience swayed, whispering louder, faster. Their chants split into two words, over and over, deafening. "Give yourself. Give yourself." I fell to my knees. My body shook, my strength fading, my breath thinning. I felt as though I were unraveling. Threads of myself tugged free and woven into the music. I thought of the caretaker's warning. I thought of the faces in the photographs. I thought of the girl, doomed before me, and I understood the cycle. Each player became the sacrifice, feeding the audience bound forever in song. The final request was not music, it was surrender. Something in me broke, not with acceptance but with fury. I seized the lamp from the floor, its flames sputtering wildly, and hurled it onto the piano. The glass shattered, oil spilling, fire licking across the wood. The music screamed. The keys clashed in chaos, the notes sharp and furious. The shadows reeled, writhing in the glow, their faceless heads twisting. The girl staggered back, her form flickering. For an instant, I thought I had won. That fire, simple mortal fire, could break the ritual. But then the piano absorbed it. The flames bent inward, pulled into the instrument's hollow body. The wood blackened, not with burning, but with hunger. The fire vanished, devoured whole, leaving the piano gleaming darker, sharper, alive. The audience roared their approval. The girl's smile returned. "It will not let you go. It never does." The piano lid flew open. A force stronger than chains dragged me forward. My hands slammed onto the keys, striking a chord that split the air like thunder. The song resumed. Not the dirge, not the frenzy, but something new. A hymn of claiming. Each note pierced deeper, stripping me thread by thread. My skin burned cold. My vision fractured. My voice joined the whispers without my will. I screamed, but the sound wove into the music. The audience swayed, satisfied at last. The girl watched, sorrow etched on her face, as though mourning what she had already known. "You will stay," she said softly, "until another listens." The final chord struck. Silence followed. True silence, heavier than any sound. I collapsed onto the keys, body trembling, heart ragged. But when I lifted my head, the hands on the keyboard were no longer mine. They were pale, slender, translucent, and the photograph on the wall, somewhere above, in the long corridor, gained another face. Mine. The silence was the worst of all. After nights of dirges, of encores, of frenzied applause, the basement lay still. The keys no longer trembled. The audience melted into the walls, leaving only faint stains of shadow. The girl was gone too, vanished without a trace, as though she had never existed. Only I remained. My hands hovered above the piano. They looked unchanged, but they no longer felt like mine. They were lighter, thinner, as though hollowed from the inside. When I pressed a finger to my own skin, I felt little more than a faint echo. I stood expecting my legs to buckle, but they carried me easily. Too easily. My body no longer resisted the cold. The damp of the basement no longer bit at me. It welcomed me, as though I had belonged here all along. And then I understood. The silence was not freedom. It was absorption. The encore had ended, and I had been folded into its aftermath. I staggered into the corridor, desperate to prove myself wrong. The photographs lined the walls, sharpened now, every face restored. I searched them frantically, heart racing with denial. And there, among the rows of students, beside faces I had never known, I saw my own. Not blurred, not fading, perfectly clear. My lips parted in horror. The photograph's version of me stared back, expression vacant, eyes hollow. I pressed my trembling hand to the glass. The reflection moved too, but slower, delayed, as though it answered reluctantly. And then it smiled. My stomach lurched. I staggered back, crashing into the opposite wall. The corridor hummed faintly, alive with whispers just beyond hearing. "You are one of us now." The days that followed, if they were days at all, blurred into sameness. The sun rose and fell beyond the courtyard, but its light no longer warmed me. Food tasted like ash. Water slid through me without quenching thirst. The caretaker never returned. Perhaps he had never been real, Or perhaps he had left once the cycle claimed another. The sheet music remained scattered across my room. Pages multiplied still, though I no longer touched them. I noticed faint stains along their edges, fingerprints, gray and dust-like, identical to the marks I left on the piano. I tried tearing them once more, just to feel defiance, but the paper resisted. It clung to my hands until I dropped it, and when it hit the floor it multiplied again, spreading across the boards like roots. The whispers no longer demanded. They reassured. Soon you will not resist. Soon you will belong. One evening I dared to stand before the chain gate again. The iron links gleamed in the fading sun, padlock still fixed. But something was different. When I touched it, my hand slid through. Not around, not over, through. My fingers passed the metal as though it were smoke. I jerked back, heart hammering, though I felt no real pulse. The chains rattled faintly, yet they held fast, solid to the world but insubstantial to me. I laughed then, a broken sound. Freedom was meaningless now. Even if the gate swung wide, where would I go? Who would see me? Who would hear me? The truth pressed in. The world outside no longer belonged to me. I belonged to the silence. The piano called less frequently now, not nightly but often enough that I could not forget. Sometimes a single note would echo through the halls, faint as breath, and I would feel it tugging me downward. Other times the silence itself would bend, thick and waiting, until my feet carried me back to the basement. The audience always returned. Never the same number, never the same shapes, but always faceless, always swaying. They watched me sit at the bench, waiting for the song, and when I played, the music poured from me effortlessly. I no longer needed guidance. My fingers knew the hymns, though I had never learned them. Each chord resonated with parts of me I had not known existed, as though the piano itself had carved new veins through my being. When the final notes faded, the applause came softer, more restrained, not triumphant, content. I realized then I was no longer entertainment. I was maintenance. My role was not to astonish, but to sustain the ritual, to keep the silence alive. And the silence, in turn, kept me. Sometimes I thought I saw the girl in the corner of the basement, watching me with sad eyes. She never approached, never touched my hands again. Perhaps she had been released when I took her place. Perhaps she was only memory now, a faint echo lingering. Once I dared to ask aloud, what happens when they choose another? The shadows stirred but did not answer. The piano hummed faintly, a sound between amusement and warning. I knew then there would be another. Someone someday would wander these halls, hear the music, ignore the warnings. They would listen, as I had listened. And when they did, the ritual would shift again. Until then, the silence was mine to tend. The corridor of photographs grew fuller. Each time I walked it, more faces sharpened, more students returned from blur to clarity. They did not smile anymore. Their eyes were dark, deep, reflecting a truth I did not want to see. And at the end of the hall, a new frame appeared. Blank at first, its glass clear, its border unmarked. But each time I passed, a faint image began to bleed through. A desk, a lamp, a figure hunched in shadow. It was me, not as I was now, but as I had been when I first arrived. A stranger, curious, foolish. My heart lurched at the sight because it meant the cycle was already rewriting itself, preparing for the next. The photograph's border bore a new carving. The silence after the song is only the prelude. I sit here now, writing these words though I do not know for whom. Perhaps they will remain unread, fading into dust. Perhaps they will call someone here, the way whispers called me. The silence is deep tonight. No music yet. No audience. Only stillness, patient and vast. And in that stillness, I hear it, the faintest breath, just beyond the door of my room. Someone is here. Someone is listening. And I know with the cold certainty of stone, that the ritual is already waiting for them. The night pressed heavier than ever. No piano, no whispers, only silence. Dense, swollen, waiting. I sat at the desk, my hand hovering over the scattered sheet music. Pages had multiplied again, covering every inch of wood, spilling to the floor like frost creeping through cracks. Their notes glimmered faintly in the lamplight. Alive. The silence was worse than any sound. My hollow chest ached with it. For the first time since the encore claimed me, I longed for the dirge. The music at least gave me purpose. The silence stripped me bare, revealing the truth I had tried not to face. I was no longer the one being haunted. I was the haunting. At some point, I must have drifted into half-sleep, though the hollow inside me did not allow rest. A sound broke it, a door creaking, faint footsteps across the courtyard. I froze. My lamp hissed low, its flame shrinking as though in deference. The silence deepened, pressing against the walls. Then I heard it, a voice, a man's, muttering softly in a language not native to these halls. English, stumbling, curious, words I had once spoken myself. "Is anyone here? I heard stories about the piano." My stomach sank. Another had come. The footsteps drew closer, hesitant but persistent. They echoed against the stone corridor, moving toward the hall of photographs. I felt the walls tremble faintly, as though the portraits themselves stirred awake to greet their new guest. I rose, though I do not remember deciding to. My body moved weightless, drifting across the floor. I passed through the door without touching it, through the walls without resistance. The stone was no longer barrier but air, and there he was, a stranger, lantern in hand, brushing dust from the glass of a frame. His eyes widened at the blurred faces, just as mine once had. His lips parted, whispering to himself, "That's strange. Why is this one missing?" I wanted to scream, to warn him, to tell him to run before the first note fell. But no sound came. My voice was gone, stripped into the silence. The portraits whispered for me. Their blurred mouths twitched open, their hollow eyes gleaming. The stranger shivered, clutching his lantern tighter, but he did not flee. Of course he didn't. Neither had I. The first note struck, low, trembling, perfectly timed. The stranger froze, his breath caught, eyes darting down the corridor. The sound came again, resonant and deliberate, pulling him forward like a thread around his chest. And I knew the ritual had begun again. I drifted behind him, powerless to intervene, watching as he moved step by step toward the stairwell. The lamp in his hand flickered violently, flame bending toward the basement. His face was pale, but his eyes gleamed with the same curiosity that had doomed me. The girl's words echoed through me once more. "Once you listen, there is no turning away." The basement door waited, wide open. The glow within pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. The stranger descended. His lantern shook, shadows stretching tall against the walls. He hesitated at the bottom, staring at the piano cloaked in dust. "It's beautiful," he whispered. The lid opened on its own, groaning like a mouth unsealing. The keys gleamed bone white. I hovered near, silent, unseen. My hollow chest ached with the futility of it. I remembered my first night, the same wonder, the same disbelief. I remembered ignoring the caretaker's warning, remembered pressing my ear against the basement door. And I knew there was no saving him. The piano would claim him, as it had claimed me. The shadows gathered. They seeped from the corners, faceless audience assembling for their ritual. Their forms bent, swaying in rhythm with a music not yet played. The stranger stepped closer, lantern trembling. His breath fogged the cold air. And then the whisper came, soft, clear, against his ear. "Play with me." He froze, eyes wide, scanning the room. His lantern flared. His chest rose, fell, quickened, and still, he did not run. I wanted to look away, but I could not. I was bound as witness. The stranger reached out, hand hovering above the keys. The piano hummed beneath his touch, eager, waiting. When his fingers pressed the first note, the basement roared alive. Shadows swelled. The audience shivered. The ritual pulsed with satisfaction. And in the reflection of the piano's glossy lid, I saw him, not the man who stood there, but the face he would become. Hollow eyes, vacant smile, a portrait waiting for its frame. The applause began before the song had even finished. Hollow, thunderous, echoing off every stone. The stranger flinched, startled, but his hands did not stop. They could not stop. The music poured from him, relentless. And I applauded too. My hollow hands clapped with the rest, drawn by a will no longer my own. My voice joined the chant, faceless, hungry, calling in unison with the audience. Encore, encore, encore. The silence after the final chord was vast, endless. The stranger sagged over the keys, breath ragged, eyes glazed. The shadows swelled closer, whispering, demanding. The ritual was ready to devour him, and for the first time, I understood my place. I was not the victim anymore. I was the witness, the usher, the voice that would one day greet another, draw them into the silence. The final request had not been me alone. The final request was the cycle itself. I drift back now, through the corridor of photographs. New faces sharpen with each encore. Mine stares from the frame, smiling faintly, eyes dark. Another face begins to form beside me. The stranger's, grainy at first, soon to be clear. The border of the frame bears fresh carvings, letters I do not remember making. There is always another listener. And if you hear it, if you find yourself awake past midnight, when the silence grows too deep, if you hear the faint trembling notes of a piano, played by no hands you can see, do not listen. Do not lean closer. Do not let it follow you into the marrow of your bones. Because once you do, the audience is already waiting, and they will never be satisfied. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.